Prologue. Cady knew she was in trouble. Unlocking the front door, she found Jameson waiting at the dining room table, his rigid figure an indication of how tightly strung his emotions were. His broad shoulders vibrated with tension, with anger. Taking a deep breath, Cady dropped her purse on the couch and walked further into the room, but kept a healthy distance between Jameson and herself. The waves of fury emanating from him had her nerves on edge, a warning to Cady that something was wrong, very wrong. With a wary eye locked on her husband, she scanned the room for Montgomery. He normally greeted her at the door, his fluffy tail wagging a happy greeting. "You're home early," she commented quietly, her breath hitching in her throat. She listened anxiously for sounds in the house, some clue to where Montgomery was. She desperately wanted to ask, but Jameson hated the dog with a passion, and his mood was already black. Perhaps it was for the best if she navigated the mess she was in first, searched for Montgomery later. For a minute, she wasn't sure he was going to answer, and the silence stretched out between them, increasing the tension. Cady glanced uneasily at her purse, wondering if she should turn tail and run. "You're late." His words made her jump. There had been a time, a few years ago, when that same voice had filled her with an overwhelming sense of security. Now it had a much different effect, and Cady cringed. "Yes, I'm sorry. I had a cake to finish, and it took a little longer than I expected." Jameson's shoulders tensed and his hands scrunched into fists. "Cakes. It's always the cakes." He held up a page torn from the newspaper. "Fucking cakes," he sneered. "Cady Caldwell, the queen of cakes." He spat her name as if it was a curse, and Cady considered her options. Should she admit to knowledge of the newspaper report or plead ignorance? Which one would work? Jameson's angry stare, his brown eyes penetrating, made it hard to decide. "Why don't we go out for supper?" Cady suggested, deciding avoidance might be best. Perhaps he could be sidetracked, though the whiskey bottle and empty glass beside it suggested it was already too late. Jameson had been drinking, and given the nearly empty bottle, he'd been at it for a while, certainly long enough to work up into a rage. He got to his feet, still clutching the newspaper in his fist. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Cady shook her head, her eyes wide. She'd been so careful. When Mario decided to enter her cake in the prestigious Decorators of America competition, he'd promised to keep her name out of it. She didn't need the attention, not when Jameson was so incredibly jealous. When Mario showed her the newspaper this morning, his blue eyes filled with regret, Cady knew it had been a terrible mistake. True to Mario's promise, the newspaper hadn't used her name, but what she'd assumed would take up a few lines in the back pages turned out to be front-page news. Mario's Bakery takes out prestigious gold medal for a sublime creation. It went on to describe the cake and its decoration at length, and the prestige which came from one of San Francisco's favorite bakeries scooping the gold medal out from under the noses of other, more famous bakeries throughout the states. They hadn't mentioned her name, but the subtle hint about the creator being the wife of a world-renowned chef was enough to cause overwhelming damage. Jameson stepped towards her, his movement slow, measured, his eyes burning with hatred.